Okay, so basically today we are going to look at the generating function of the Stirling numbers and the Stirling inversion formula. Okay, that's what we are looking to do. So to do this, we will first define two polynomials. Okay, so we are going to define two polynomials. One is called as, what happened? Yeah. So one is called as the rising factorial function, and the other one is called as the falling factorial function. Okay. So the rising factorial function is like this. These are basically, both of them are nth degree polynomials. Okay, which we are going to denote like this. This is the rising factorial function, and I think all of y'all would agree with this. This is just basically x times x plus 1, x plus 2 up to x plus n minus 1. Okay, that's exactly n of these products, and this is going to be a nth degree polynomial, correct? Okay, and we will define the following factorial function, which is xn equal, this is called as the rising factorial, and this is called as the falling factorial function, which is x times x minus 1, x minus 2 up to x minus, now it's x minus n minus 1, which is x minus n plus 1. Okay, that is the falling factorial. Okay, I hope all of you all know that if you, if we look at the set of all polynomials of degree less than or equal to n, okay, over R, you can look at it over R, set of all polynomials of degree less than or equal to n over R. Okay, this does not form a ring, but it forms a vector space over R, right? You add two polynomials whose degree is less than or equal to n, you're going to get a polynomial whose degree is less than or equal to n, multiply c times to it, so it's going to form a ring. All the basic operations will also work. So that forms a vector space over R. Any idea what's the dimension of that vector space? N plus 1. Can you give me a basis for the vector space? Yeah, 1 x square up to x raised to n, right? 1 x square up to x raised to n. So it's a n plus 1 dimensional vector space. Okay, I will not prove it. You can attempt at doing this. It's quite simple. You would need to show that it's linearly independent. By definition of a polynomial itself, this is going to be a spanning set, but you will have to show that it is linearly independent, okay, which might involve some work if you are keen on doing everything. But that's a n plus 1 dimensional vector space. So what we can see is that if I take, since it's an n plus 1 dimensional vector space, we know that any n plus 1 linearly independent subset of it is also a basis of the set, right? If I look at a k dimensional vector space, any k linearly independent subset will be a basis, right? Because that's this thing, because that's going to be the maximal linearly independent set. Anyway, so that's so why I am telling you that is, from that you will be able to notice that if I look at x1, what is going to be x1? X, right? So let's take in fact 1 x1, okay, which is x, then x1 times x2, sorry, not x1, x2, 1 x x1, 1 x1, which is x, x2, x3 up to x raised to n. Okay, so 1 is a constant polynomial, x1 is a polynomial of degree 1, x2 is a polynomial of degree 2 up to a polynomial of degree n. Can you say that this is going to be a linearly independent set? In fact, you can say something even more than that. You can actually show that in a vector space, in this particular vector space, that is the set of all polynomials of degree less than or equal to n, if you take any set of polynomials, say p0, p1 up to pn, such that p0 is a constant polynomial, non-zero constant polynomial, p1 is a polynomial of degree 1, p2 is a polynomial of degree 2, p3 is a polynomial of degree 3, and pn is a polynomial of degree n, it will always be linearly independent. Think about it. Say suppose you multiply c0 to p0, c1 to p1 up to cn to pn equated to 0. Okay. Now open up the polynomials, right? Put their coefficients together. Now what happens is you will see that the c0 has to be 0, not c0. You'll have to see that you'll be able to see that cn is 0. Why is cn 0? Because the only coefficient, the only term that gets multiplied to x raised to n is going to be cn, right? That's the only one that is going to get multiplied to x. So in fact it will be cn times the coefficient of pn. So that product is 0, which means cn has to be 0, because the other one is non-zero, because we know that. Since that is 0, what happens? What is the coefficient of the n minus 1 term? It is going to be the cn is 0, so that portion is 0. So it will compulsorily be the coefficient of n minus 1 of pn minus 1 times cn minus 1, right? Which is again going to be 0. Just by this, again it is going to tell you that cn minus 1 is 0. So now you can follow the same technique and you can show that all the ci's have to be 0, which means that this is going to be a linearly independent set. So that's quite clear. So therefore, in particular, 1, x1, x2 up to x raised to n, xn are all going to be, is going to form a linearly independent set. Okay, and the order of that linearly independent set is n plus 1, so it's going to be a basis for, right, 1, x1, x2 up to xn. It's going to be a linearly independent set. We have just shown it's going to be a linearly independent set of order n plus 1. Hence it's going to be a basis. No? What happened? Yeah? I did not get you. Yeah, so I'm telling you, look at the set B equals 1, x, this is x1, this is a polynomial of degree 1, polynomial of degree 2, polynomial of degree n, right? Polynomial of degree 1 to constant, 1, 2, 3 up to n. So this is going to form a basis because it's linearly independent. We have just proved it, and we know that any the vector space which we are talking about, we know that that's n plus 1 dimensional vector space. So any linearly independent set of n plus 1 elements is going to be a basis. So this forms a basis. Similarly, this, even if I use the lower factorials, it's going to form a basis. Okay, something to keep in mind as we do our proofs. So I'm not proving these things rigorously because this is vector spaces, but I'm sure all of you all can do the proofs on your own. Okay, so a small exercise is, can we relate these two in some manner? Okay, and it works out that for any n in n, if you look at the minus x n, okay, what do you get this to be in terms of the following factorial. Okay, let's see. It's not difficult to see this. So minus x n, what will this be? By definition, this is minus x, right? Then minus x plus 1, correct, into minus x plus 2 up to minus x plus n minus 1. Okay, we'll pull out minus from each of these brackets. So how many minus 1s you are pulling out? Minus 1 raised to, from each of these brackets, how many brackets are they? N. So you're going to get minus 1 raised to n times x, x minus 1, x minus 2 up to x minus n plus 1, right? That's exactly what we have, which is minus 1 raised to n x n. Okay, so this tells us that this is nothing but minus 1 raised to n. So this is the relation between the falling factorial and the rising factorial. Okay, and similarly someone can tell me, in fact it follows as a corollary to this, that for any n in n, what would be minus 1 n? Yes, what would this be? Think about it. In place of x, if I put minus x, here you will get x, right? Here you will get yeah, so minus x n. Okay, I take that minus that side, so it will be exactly the same as minus 1 raised to n x n. Okay, or you can perform the proof in exactly the same manner. That's okay. So you can see both these work. Now we will look at the generating function, some interesting generating functions of, and I will be making some this thing in linear algebra. So the generating function of this is in fact the what is it called? We call it as the simple generating. What was the term we had used? Was it the simple? What was the term we had used? Ordinary generating function. Okay, this is in fact the ordinary generating function of the unsigned Stirling number, unsigned first Stirling number. Okay, so this is the generating function of the unsigned first Stirling number. So n going from 1 to, that is of course for a fixed for a fixed n it would be actually, for a fixed n this would be the generating function. So summation small s. Okay, I will write small s in this way. Okay, because when when k goes beyond n, anyway you're going to get zeros. So my question is, what is this? Okay, and surprisingly enough, because I am not giving you a proof which is, this is actually xn. Okay, this is actually xn. It should amuse you how this actually comes up. Proof is very simple. We just go by induction to get this. Okay, so the proof is by induction. By induction on n. Okay. So for n equals 1, okay, for n equals 1, let's check. For n equals 1, the left hand side gives us mod S11, right? There is nothing else here. X, mod S11 x, or S11 is 1, right? S11 is 1, and the left hand side is also x1, which is x. So for n equals 1, there's actually nothing to prove. Okay, that works. So we'll assume it for n. I prefer to do that. Right? Assume for n and prove it for n plus 1. So assume that summation k going from 1 to n mod n k x raised to k equals x. And we'll prove it for n plus 1. We'll go from the right side to the left side. So what is your x n plus 1? What is, so we want to use induction, so we've got to use the previous stage. Can you tell me what this is in terms of xn? Can we represent, just like your factorial, you know your n plus 1 factorial is n factorial times n plus 1. What will this become? What is this? This is x plus 1 up to x raised to n minus 1 into x plus n, right? So that first initial part is x n, right, into x plus n. That's exactly what it is. Okay. Now we know that this is nothing but this. So let's substitute. We will get summation k going from 1 to n s n comma k x raised to k times x plus n. Okay, and we can multiply this x plus n. This is a finite sum. We can multiply this x plus n into all of these terms, right? Distribute. And we get okay, so if we multiply that, we will essentially get summation k going from 1 to n mod s n comma k x raised to k plus 1, right, plus summation k going from 1 to n mod s n comma k x raised to k n times. Okay. So I want to match these. Let me see. I want to combine the xk term of here with the xk term here. That's what I want to do. In fact, we can do it. Yeah, let's see. This starts from x raised to 2 to this thing, right? What would be the x term here? What would be the 0th term here? Because this starts with x, right? So if I had to put the coefficient of x, what would it be? Yeah, Sn 0, because 2, so for 2 it is 1, so for 0 it would be, for 1 it would be 0. Sn 0 is 0. Okay, so that would be 0. So it is okay for us to simply write this as summation going from 0 to n mod Sn k x raised to k plus 1 plus, here what happens? See, you can do this manipulation in many ways. 1, 2. Here what is missing out is the n plus 1th term. So what is the n plus 1th term here? Means if we had to have the n plus 1th term, what would it be? Here I can put the 0th term because it's anyway 0, so why not? What would be the n plus 1th term? The k is n plus 1, right? But Sn comma n plus 1, there is no way you can get a permutation if you don't remember what this is. This is the number of permutations of an n set with k orbits. It's impossible to have permutations of an n set with n plus 1 orbits. So Sn n plus 1 would be 0. Okay, so that would be 0. So this would give us we can go up to n plus 1. Now we have the same number of terms, and in fact it's exactly the same things, it's just written differently. I mean, we have the same powers of x appearing. So let's put this from 1 to n plus 1. So we have summation k going from 1 to n plus 1. What would we get here? N comma. For 0 it is 0. So it would be k minus 1, I think, right? K minus 1, right? X raised to k. That's exactly what you get. And then we'll combine the terms. If you remember, we had proved a recurrence relation for the unsigned first Stirling number, and the recurrence relation is just what is appearing here. Okay, this is nothing but S n plus 1 comma k. Right, if you remember how we had done it, we had asked ourselves whether n is in a orbit on its own or not. When it is an orbit on its own, we would have these many, and when it was not on an orbit on its own, we had these many. That was the trick. Okay, so this was S n plus 1 comma k, x raised to k. What is this? This is exactly what we want on the left hand side. So this proves our, what we have done is x n plus 1 we have shown is this. Okay, so this gives us a generating function for the unsigned Stirling number, and from here we can pull off a generating function for the signed Stirling number, because why not, right? So we want a generating function for the signed Stirling number. Okay, it's obviously not this. So let's try to get what this is. We will need to use the previous theorem for this, a very simple calculation. So we have summation k going from 1 to n, S n comma k, x raised to k. Okay, this is by definition of the signed Stirling number. This is minus 1 raised to n plus k mod S n comma k, x raised to k. Okay, and what this is I can take out the minus 1 raised to n out. Okay, and I'm going to put 1 minus 1 with the x, so that will give me summation k going from 1 to n mod S n comma k minus 1 raised to minus x raised to k. Okay, and from the previous theorem, what does this become? In the previous theorem we had x, here we have minus x. So what we will get? Minus 1 raised to n, then minus x raised to n. When there was x, we had x raised to n, so then the minus x we will have minus x, the rising factorial of this. Okay, and what is this? This is nothing but minus 1 raised to n into the following factorial of x, and we know that this is 1, so this is nothing but the following factorial of x. So this gives us the signed Stirling number, the generating function of the signed Stirling number. Okay, so the other one would be a relation for the I don't know if you have noticed, there is something which you are doing here which I have omitted from telling you. So you know the change of basis matrix in a vector space, right? If you have a matrix B, how do you get the change of matrix, change of basis matrix? You have a matrix B and a matrix B prime, right? You know the representation of vectors in terms of B. How will you get the representation of matrix of the vectors in terms of B prime? Right? There is one change of matrix basis which you multiply to it. No? When you write, so how do you get that change of matrix, change of basis matrix? By taking the elements of B, taking the elements of B and representing them in terms of the elements of B prime, right? And then looking at the kind of like the coefficient matrix, the matrix that you get. That's exactly what that becomes the change of. Now, to change the vectors from the representation of vectors in B to the vectors in C, you simply multiply by that P. That's the idea. If you are not sure, you can come back, you can check back at it. But this, in fact, tells us this one. It is, in fact, as I said, these following factorials give us a basis for the vector space which we are interested in, right? So this gives us a representation of the following factorials in terms of the usual basis of that vector space. The usual basis of that vector space is 1 x square up to x raised to n. Can you see that? Let me show you. If you are not this thing, of course the zeroth term is obvious. 1 is equal to 1. That's the same. But what about, what is x1? Let's see. This is nothing but s 1 comma 1 x, right? What is x2? This is s 2 comma 1 x plus s 2 comma 2 x square. That's what it's telling us. When you put n equals 2, that's what you get. Put n equals 3, and we can go up to the nth term also. This is in fact a nice, yeah, this is a nice lower triangular matrix, right? That's going to be a nice lower triangular matrix. Okay, you can see that your change of basis matrix is nothing but S11 0 0 S21 S22 0 S31. Of course, I have only done up to third stage. If you do up to nth stage, you will get for the nth order this thing. So S32 S33. That's what this has told us. Okay, and you all know that, see, if this is the change of basis matrix from, this is going to be the change of basis matrix from the usual basis to this basis, the lower factorial basis. What if you want to go from lower factorial to the usual basis? Then what is the change of basis? What is the change of basis matrix? It's going to be the inverse of this, right? It's going to be the exactly the inverse of this. Okay, it's quite obvious. I'll tell you why. You can look at, let's call that vector space as V. Okay, you can look at the transformation T that takes V to V in this manner. You take T of, we know that if you have a basis here and have a basis there, then to uh, to uh, to define a vector space uniquely, you in fact just need to tell where you are taking your basis elements, right? Once you take your basis element, you can define this thing uniquely by telling where you take your basis elements to. Here, what you're doing is you're taking your basis elements x. Let me check properly. Yeah, xk. So this one I'm looking at with basis elements. It doesn't matter. But I'm taking this to. What I'm taking this to? S. Let's not go with k. T. Okay. So st xt I'm taking to s t comma 1 x plus s t comma 2 x square up to s t comma t x t. That's the way I am defining my this thing. So for t equals, of course, t is 0, 1. Of course, t0 is the 1. Okay. So 1 goes to 1. T goes from 0 to what? N. Okay. That will define this thing. Now, what is the inverse of this map? So this map takes just a second. This is not. There is a mistake here. This is going to give me the identity map. Just a second. Is it? I think I'm making an error. I think I want to take xt to this. If I take xt to this, yeah, I think, let me just check. I think I could be making an error. In fact, just a second. X raised to t, if I take here. So therefore, this is taking x raised to t to xt. This is what xt is. The inverse of this map so this essentially what it's doing is I am a little confused. If you take yes, this would be p times the tth position, right? That's what it looks like. Yeah, correct. This is fine. So what is the what are the matrix of this transformation? I'm looking with you have to check your specifying your basis elements correctly. That's the this thing. if I take the other side, would simply be the matrix of this transformation is this, right? Uh, no, is it? Yes, correct. It is this. The matrix of this transformation is exactly P. Correct? Is it not? The matrix of this transformation is with respect to the original basis, okay? That is T with respect to the original basis is going to be P. I hope I'm right. Yes, that's fine. The matrix of this transformation is going to be P. How do you find a matrix of the transformation? Take any basis element, T of any basis element, and represent it as linear sum of the basis elements. Okay, in the first coordinate, that's exactly what you get. Okay, you look at what is the the tth coordinate, the tth row is exactly this. That's this thing. So why I am telling you this is, if you look at the inverse, what does the inverse do? Yeah. So this transformation takes xt to x raised to t to xt. The inverse will take xt to x raised to t. Okay, and what will be the show you. So the inverse of this transformation, okay, it will take xt to x raised to t, right? It's exactly that. There is no other way, because we know that you can define a linear transformation based on the basis. And what would be the matrix of this transformation? Okay, by the way, it would do this, but I am looking at the matrix with respect to the original basis only. Okay, at least I think I am. Hope so. Yeah. So what would be this thing? We know that this is nothing but P inverse, right? So what is this P inverse? Right? What is this P inverse? How do you get P inverse? So to get P inverse, the P inverse is in fact asking you to represent it's asking you, where does T inverse of x raised to t go? It asks you, where does T inverse of x raised to t go? Right? We know that this goes here by the inverse, because that's the way T is defined. So the inverse is going to just take that. So T inverse of x raised to t, where does it go? That's the basic question. From we will get the row based on where this goes, right? You are yes, that's the idea. Is it the coefficients of Just a second. I look at a vector represented with respect to the first basis, it is nothing but p times the vector with respect to the other basis, b prime. Okay, that's this is another way. That's another. I don't know whether how much of this is to be achieved. Anyway, but yeah, so this in fact gives us this. If we have this vector represented with this respect to the first basis, okay, you take this p multiplied. So vector means what? Vector with respect to the first basis means what? This is going to be a column matrix with respect to the coefficients are going to be this thing coming from this basis. At these coefficients, you are writing the vector in terms of linear sum of these basis elements. How do you get that? Is by multiplying p here. To go the other side, you are doing, in fact, that gives us this, right? Let me see. I think I am making a little bit of a mess up here. You take yeah, so to get this, I would have to get, if you want to go the other representation, then it's nothing but P inverse V B. Okay, I am interested in this, how to catch hold of this. And so this is essentially to get this, I need to know how to, there is one way, you can check for the inverse of this matrix, okay, which is difficult, but the other way is to see if I can represent these elements in terms of these basis elements in terms of those basis elements. These basis elements are what? The lower factorials, right? So can I represent, no, I went the other direction, didn't I? This is like this, so this is, yeah. So can I represent the usual basis in terms of, to get this P inverse, the question is, can I represent the usual basis? Okay, I think I have confused you. Let's have a look at it again. See, if I have two bases B and B prime, if I have two bases, okay, you have a vector with respect to this basis. That means you are writing this vector as a linear sum of these basis elements. We know that every vector can be written uniquely as a linear sum of basis elements, right? Similarly, you can write this vector as a linear sum of these basis elements. Okay. Now, if I find the change of basis matrix, that is, how do I find this change of basis matrix? You can actually very easily prove this by multiplication, by taking each of these vectors and writing them uniquely as linear sums of these basis elements, right? And noting down, this will be your change of basis matrix, okay? Change of basis, this will be the change of basis matrix from what I wanted, from B prime to B, B prime to B, okay? If this is your change of basis matrix, then what happens is, you will see that this, okay, will be nothing but P times this. Okay. So if I want a vector represented in terms of these basis elements, I simply take this P and multiply it to this vector. This is actually I need to get a column. So this is going to be n cross n into, this is a column, right? I'm just checking whether, so this is going to be n cross 1, correct. So if I want this in terms of that, it's simply multiply by P inverse on both sides. We have, that would give me my this thing. So my question is how to find this P inverse. So for us, this B is the original basis, which is 1x x square up to x raised to n, and this is the lower factorials, 1 x1 x2 up to xn. Okay, that's what I'm looking for. So I have got a representation of the lower factorials in terms of the usual basis. I want the usual basis in terms of the lower factorials. If I get the usual basis in terms of the lower factorials, I have got P inverse. Okay, so that's what I am looking for. I hope at least now it is making some sense, but you would need to prove certain things in linear algebra which I have messed up. So I think you can. So that comes very nicely. Okay. So I'm calling this as the generating function of the second Stirling number, but it is not like the usual generating function which you see. You could of the second Stirling number, second. So here, in fact, I am going to show that x raised to x raised to n, as I said, writing these basis elements in terms of this. Sorry. Okay, I am interested in knowing what these coefficients are. I want to write these in terms of these, right? So I am interested in what these coefficients. Surprisingly, this exactly becomes second Stirling number. Okay, so that's what it is. Proof is very simple. The proof is just by induction in exactly the same. So let's see, for n equals 1 there is absolutely nothing to prove. N equals 1, this is x, right? What happens here when n is 1? You will get s1 1 x1, x1 is x, s1 1 is 1. Okay, so this is done for that. So assume for n, and we want to prove for n plus 1. So how do I prove for n plus 1? X n plus 1, we all know that x n plus 1 is nothing but x raised to n times x, right? So this is x raised to n by definition is, by assumption is, okay, going from 1 to n, capital S n k x k times x. I'm going to multiply this x inside like just before, but xk times x. Okay, I'm going to do a manipulation here because okay, going from 1 to n, s n k x k times, we want x minus k. Why x minus k? Because this one is, this one here is 1 up to, sorry, x minus 1 up to x minus k plus 1. So that's the next one. Okay, so plus k. So you can see for each one I am, so k going from 1 to n, I am splitting this across. Okay, s n comma k, xk times x minus k plus summation k going from 1 to n, k times s n comma k xk. Hope this is okay. Okay, which is, what is this going to give us? What is this? What is this one? This is the k plus 1th falling factorial, right? xk times x minus k, that is the k plus 1th falling factorial. Is it okay? That's the k plus 1th falling factorial. I hope that's okay. Plus, okay, very similar manipulation like last time, nothing really different. We are going to get a recurrence relation which we have for this also. Okay, now again, here we have from, we want to combine those terms, right? So this is going to go from 2 to n, this goes from 1 to n. So I want to start from 1. So check the 0th one, but 0th one is anyway 0. So let's put it, k going from 0 to n, yes. The 0th term is 0. So I can, of this sum, the 0th term is 0. Okay, x k plus 1 plus summation. Here again this goes up to n plus 1. So I want this also to go up to n plus 1. I want to combine the terms, right? Just do whatever manipulation you are comfortable with. But you can see here the n plus 1th term is also 0. Sn comma n plus 1 is 0. Okay, capital S is also 0. S n comma k x k, because the n plus 1th term is 0. Okay, now get these equal. So summation k going from 1 to n plus 1. Okay, what do you get here? S, I think n comma k minus 1 x k plus summation k going from 1 to n plus 1 k. Okay, let's combine. K going from 1 to n plus 1. We know that this is exactly the recurrence relation for okay, that's the recurrence relation. So this is going to give us, sorry, summation k going from 1 to n plus 1. If you look back, n plus 1 comma k x k. That proves it. So what we have done here is now represented these bases in terms of those bases. Okay. So what would be the P inverse? If that was P, what would be P inverse? What would be P inverse? If that was P, what we had got was P. Here what would be P inverse? The first row would be, it would be lower triangular again, S11, second row would be S11 0 0 0, S21 S22 0 0 0, S31 S32 S33 0 0 0, and so on. So that would be the thing. So this gives us something nice about, so we know P times P inverse is the identity matrix. Okay, since P times P inverse is the identity matrix, we in fact, if you are okay with using linear algebra, you could in fact do the proof in that manner itself, but I will give you the proof by simply computing it. Okay, so let's see. I will, if you look at P times P inverse, what do you actually get? P times P inverse will give you what? If P is your small s's, your P inverse is your big s's, right? So what would be the elements of that? If P is S n comma k, not n comma k, but let's say I comma k, I comma j, okay, where your here I would have to be a little careful because I want to start with 0. So let's just do it this way. We'll keep these i's from 0 to n and keep the j's a little bit change of notation here. 0 we normally don't represent matrix this thing with the 0th element. I'm just representing 0th element as the 1 for me. Okay, I hope that's okay. So this is in fact, will this give me s? I think there could be a, so 1 is 1, then you have x is, x1 would be x, that's fine. x2 was what? I'm just checking something, huh? S21 x s. Oh, this is slight problem here. That one term will be left out. I think that's okay. S. Yeah. So the matrix would be something like this. It would be 1 zeros. And here you would have 0 1 zeros. Then you would have here it would be 0 S21 S22, right, and then zeros. It's still lower triangular, but the first column is 1 0 0 0 0. Okay, anyway, so that's what we would have. J going from 0 to n. Okay, if you have this is your P, then your P inverse is nothing but small s I comma j, right? That's what we have proved, because we are representing in the other direction. So that's what we have proved. So when I look at P times P inverse, what is P times P inverse? What is the definition? What is the elements of this set? What is, if A is Aij and B is B, let me not use Jk n cross m, m cross t. What will be AB? This will be a n cross t matrix, and what will be the elements of this? It will be summation, right? It will be summation j. I have, okay, j going from 1 to, what is it? Let me go from S going from 1 to j, right? It's the, it's in column of this and number of rows of that. A, I, S, B, S, K. That would be the I comma kth element of this. That's the I comma kth element of this. So here what happens is you get summation. Of course, I'm starting with 0 here, so I better check myself. So it's going to be a little careful. S going from 0 to j, okay, it's going to be capital S I comma S, okay, bad notations, I will use better notations in the this thing. This is S comma j, that's what you are going to get if you multiply. But what do we know this is? This is P times P inverse, right? So therefore this is nothing but this is delta Ij, right? Except on the diagonals these are 1, otherwise it's 0. That tells us that this thing, if I multiply in the other direction, then I'll get S times capital S. Okay, this is what this tells us. But I will prove this without using linear algebra just because we can. Okay, so that you don't believe that also that there is a need for it. Okay, so the theorem is you can go both sides. See, you can use linear algebra and prove it on your own, but I will do it in this manner. Actually, I am using linear algebra, but I am not using too much. I am just using the fact that these form bases. So that's so for n comma k in n depends on whether what assumptions you want to make. 1 to n, okay, capital S n comma j, small j comma what I want k, right, k. This is always going to be delta. You all know what is this delta, right? Delta n comma j. What is it? Yeah, when they are equal it is 1, when they are not equal it is 0. Okay, so when k is greater than n there is no problem. Okay, if you take the different cases, so k greater than n, k less than n, and this thing. So if k is greater than n, then what happens here is all these, because your j's will always be less than n, your j lies between 1 and n, right? So if k is greater than n, your j will be strictly less than k. J will be strictly less than k, right? In this sum, if k is greater than n, then j lies between 1 and n. So j will be strictly less than k, which means that this will always be 0. So summation will be 0. Okay, is that okay? For j equals 1 to up to n, s j comma k will be equal to 0 because j is less than k. J is less than k, this has to be 0. So therefore what happens is automatically this j going from 1 to n, capital S n comma j, small j comma k would be 0, which is exactly what we want. This is delta n comma j, right? This is different from this. So delta n comma, not j, this is k, n comma k. All terms are 0, so it's 0. So suppose k is less than or equal to okay. Now we do some amount of manipulation, that is you take this x raised to n, represent it in terms of the lower order, the following factorials. Okay, so you get here r going from 1 to n, s and r, check this up that I am doing it correctly. This, when I represent it in this form, s and r, x r, that's what we have proved. Okay, I am using different notations on purpose, but each of these lower following factorials I am going to represent in terms of this. Okay, that will give me capital S and R using the same notations, summation j going from 1 to r. Okay, what is this one? How do you represent this in terms of those? Small s. That's what we have done. So this is going to be small s r comma j. Is that okay? X raised to j, of course. Okay, so multiply this inside. Okay, multiply this inside, I will get summation r going from 1 to n, summation j going from 1 to n, and distributing this across, right? This is nothing but distributivity. So capital S n comma r, small s r comma j, Where is k? Oh, that's fine. X raised to j. Okay, now you notice here that when j goes beyond r up to n, when j is bigger than r, anyway this is 0, right? So I am going to simply put zeros to this, simply adding zeros. J going from 1 to n, okay, because I am just adding zeros, okay. N comma r, small s r comma j, x raised to j. Okay. Let me tell you what I am trying to do. What I am trying to do is I am going to represent this x raised to n's in terms of x1, x raised to 1, x raised to 2 up to x raised to n. See, so I am trying to pull out the coefficient of x raised to, you can see what is appearing here, right? These all will be from, this will vary, this j altogether is going to vary from 1 to n. So I am trying to pull out what is the coefficient of x raised to j. That means what do I need to do? This is in the inner sum, I need to take it to the outer sum. So I need to flip this over. And I can do that. There is no harm in doing this. This is, I either go across this way, and for each of these I go up, or I go from here and then go across this side. That's the simple thing. So I can easily just flip this, and the advantage of doing this is that we now have, we can take this out common, right? This x raised to j is now constant to the inner sum. I can take it out common, correct? I can take it out common, right? So what are the coefficients? See, this forms a basis for that vector space, right? This is a polynomial on this side, nth degree polynomial on this side, nth degree polynomial on this side. They are equal. When can they be equal? If the corresponding coefficients are equal, right? Constant coefficient is equal to constant coefficient, and so on. So what you notice here, therefore if k is less than n, equating, okay, or I'll just write it directly, I'll tell you why. So equating powers of x raised to, let us call it as k, for k equals 1 to up to, in fact I should have put here k, that would have been nicer. I'll just shift this to k, no, leave it, 1 to up to n on both sides. We get, so ask yourself, what is the coefficient of x raised to k on this side? It is summation, what is it? Summation, in place of j you put k, right? So summation, I hope you are with me, r going from 1 to n, s n comma r, small s r comma k, correct? This is the coefficient of, and what is it on the left hand side? Yeah, on the left hand side what is the coefficient of x raised to k? Yeah, left hand side what's the coefficient of x raised to k? If k is n, it is 1, and if k is strictly less than n, 0, right, which is exactly delta nk. Okay, so that's the way of doing this. Again, you could have used a little bit of linear algebra and got your nice non-computative proof. Okay, let me look at the other side also. I want to prove the other one also. Okay, just because we are, in fact Using linear algebra, you would be able to flip. So let me do the other way also. Okay, so summation. So for n comma k and n, summation r going from 1 to n, small s r comma k, sorry, yeah, into capital S, not r comma k, this is n comma k, capital S r comma k. Okay, this is again also delta n k. That's the coefficient of P inverse times P. This is the coefficient of P inverse times P. Okay, how do I prove this? For this, I will start with the lower, this thing, the following factorial. Again, if let me tell you that straight away. If k is greater than n, there is absolutely nothing to prove. If k is greater than n, why? If k is greater than n, there is nothing to prove. Why? Because these r's will be strictly less than k, so this will always be 0. If k is greater than n, these r's will be always 0. So this full thing would be, I'm right, no? K is greater than, yeah, correct. K is greater than n. If k is greater than n, this one will always be this thing, so this will be 0. So that we don't have to worry about. Now let's start with the following factorial. Okay, we know that this is nothing but summation r going from 1 to n, small s n comma r x raised to r. Then we represent this in terms of the following factorial. Same idea. I'm going to use the fact that this forms a basis for this thing. Okay, that these form a basis. That's what I'm going to use. S n comma r summation. What is this? Let's go j going from 1 to r, capital S r comma j x j. Is this okay? Yeah. Okay. Multiply this inside, we get summation r going from 1 to n, small s n comma r, capital S r comma j. Oh, sorry, I have taken off the summation j going from 1 to r, small s n comma r, capital S r comma j x j. Okay. Now notice here that when j is greater than r, anyway this is 0. Right. So anyway, by adding zeros, when j is greater than r, I'm going to add zeros to give me summation j going from 1 to n. Okay. So for, let me write here, for r less than n, this is going to be s n comma r, capital S r comma j. I'm adding zeros, okay, in the next step. I have just put zeros. Nothing changes when I add zeros, right? So now again, as I have said, I want to find the coefficients of the following factorials. Okay, so this is adding across the, for each point on the x-axis, you are checking for the lattice points across the y-axis. You can do the opposite way, go across the y-axis and check. So you can switch these. J going from 1 to n, summation r going from 1 to n, s n comma r. And the advantage of doing this is now this comes out, we get the coefficient of xj in it. Okay, and now what happens? This forms a basis, this x x1 x2 1 x1 x2, that forms a basis for the vector space of all polynomials of degree less than or equal to n. Correct? You have one vector on this side which is xn and another vector on this side, but the representation is unique. The representation of a vector as a linear sum of basis elements we know is unique, right? Both these are two different representations. One is given like this, one is one here and zeros for the rest. So therefore you can equate. You can't just equate, but now you can equate. And equating the coefficients of equating coefficients of xk for k equals 1 to up to n on both sides, what do you get? Summation r going from 1 to n, small s n comma r, capital S r comma j. What will this be? Yeah, what is this going to give us? Equating the coefficients, what will this be? Yeah, what is it? This would be k, right? No, I have made a mistake. This is k. Just r. That's fine. So what will this be? When r is equal to n, you will get 1. Right? When r is n, when k is n, you will get 1, and otherwise you are going to get 0. So that is exactly delta n comma k. That's the proof. Okay. So it gives us the inverse of that. So this, in fact, we proved it both sides, which you don't need to do in this thing, because we know that a matrix has a left inverse if and only if it has a right inverse. Actually, it's not required, but I am not using any metric spaces, matrix algebra also here. And this is what gives us the Stirling inversion formula. We have time to complete that. So that's an inversion formula which we have. The Stirling inversion formula. So this is like this. Suppose you have a function, you have two functions f and g from n to r. Okay, so suppose f and g are two functions from n to r. Suppose f and g are two functions from n to r. Okay, if f is related to g in this manner, that is, if f is related to g in this manner, that is fn equals summation I think k going from 1 to n. Let me use the same notations. Yeah, capital S n comma k g k. Can you see what I have done here? So if f is related to g in this manner, then you can find g in terms of f. Gn will be, any idea what? Yeah, what are the coefficients of f k here? Small s and k. Okay, if f is related to g in this manner, then g is related to f in this manner. That's what it is. Very simple to prove this. It's not difficult. All these inversion formulas, in fact, have this similar this thing which you do. That is, First you prove that it's delta n j. So let's start with, I don't need to do both sides. Okay, I need to do both sides, but if I do this side, no, I will be using one of these theorems, and go the other side, I will be using exactly the other one. You will get delta n k. Let's do both. So suppose Fn equals summation k going from 1 to n, capital Sn k, gk for every n in n. I need to prove that g can be written in f in this manner. Okay, so start with this. So summation k going from 1 to n. Yeah, any idea what we will do here? What will we do? We know the expression of f in terms of g in this manner. What will we do? We'll take that and substitute here. Okay, so you will get, this is a very common technique. Sen k. Can you see what's happening here? Let me use, just because 1 to k, right? Just check I'm using the correct notations. S, I think it's k comma r, g r, correct? Gr, correct? Yes. In place of n I have to put k, in place of k I have to put r. That's what I, okay. Multiply this throughout to give us k going from 1 to n, summation r going from 1 to k, small s n comma k, capital S k comma r, gr. Okay. Now I want this g to come out of this sum. Why I wanted to come out of the sum? Then I will get this kind of a thing in the sum, which I know what it is. Okay, so I have to switch the sums, but switching the sums cannot be done because this sum has a dependence on this sum. I can't switch this, right? This has a dependence on this. This is going to go up only from r going from 1 to k up to the n equals k line. You look at the n axis for each k, the k axis. Along the x axis you take the k variable, along the y axis you take the r variable. So this is going to sum up only from 1 to k. But ask yourself, beyond k what happens? Zeros, right? We can add zeros. So this will give us, that will take off the dependence, right? On this sum, that will take off the dependence. R going from 1 to n, this is what we did last time also. S n comma k, capital S, k comma r, gr. Is that okay? We have taken off the dependence on that, this thing. Put it full this thing, that's small trick. So now we can interchange the sums. 1 to n, summation k going from 1 to n, and take that out common. Right? Gr. What is this? What is this? What is this? Delta n r. Okay, delta n r. That is delta n r. So this is summation r going from 1 to n, delta n r gr. What is this? Gn. Everything else is going to be 0 except for delta nn. So this is nothing but gn. So we have proved the result. One side. Now you need to assume that gn can be written as, I think it was the, that side, right? So gn is equal to k going from 1 to n, small s n comma k, f k for every n in n. Okay, assume this, and you need to prove the other side, which you will have to follow exactly the same proof, except for here in this sum you will get capital S n k, small s k r, that's it. Otherwise it's exactly the same proof. Okay, so do this side and your proof will be done. What you need to prove? You need to prove that summation k going from 1 to n capital S n k g k is equal to f n. So you follow these exact similar steps and you will get f n at the end. Okay, check that you do it. Okay, so that's your this thing. So since we proved some weird theorem like this, let's at least give one application for it, right? Otherwise it's a weird theorem. I don't know of any other application, so you can tell me if you find out, but one small application we do have for this. So that is this one. So I know that so 1 is equal to something, in fact the proof I'll tell you. So I know that Bn is summation k going from 1 to n, okay, capital S, this is definition 1, right? So this is my f, this is my g. G is constant 1, okay, and my g is b. So therefore what does this tell me? That 1 is the constant 1 function can be written as summation k going from 1 to n what, small s n k b k. Can you see what has happened here? So this tells you that you look at any of these type of sums, you always get 1. Okay, you can try and see, but it has to work since we proved it. S n comma k b k, that's this thing, right? That's one application you can think of. If someone gets some other thing, please come and tell. That's, yeah, we'll stop with this.